At 77 years old, O.J. Simpson is no longer the dazzling figure who once sprinted across green fields with unstoppable grace. Time has slowed the man once called the Juice. Now he sits in the quiet of his later years, facing questions that have lingered for decades. What truths remain hidden in the story of one of the most electrifying and controversial names in NFL history? His career seemed like something written for Hollywood. Heisman glory at USC. Records shattered with the Buffalo Bills. A charisma so radiant that Madison Avenue made him the face of American aspiration. Yet behind the fame was turbulence. Behind the million-dollar smile lay shadows that never quite faded. The journey of O.J. Simpson is not just about touchdowns and trophies. It is about power, betrayal, secrets, and grudges that never died. For every cheer that filled the stadium, there were whispers of mistrust. For every advertisement that turned him into a household name, there was an undercurrent of conflict, a storm building beneath the polished surface. Tonight, we uncover the 5 hidden truths that defined O.J. Simpson's NFL journey. These are not the highlight reels you've seen, nor the courtroom sagas replayed endlessly on television. They are the untold rivalries, the personal battles, and the cold realities that shaped the man behind the mask. Why did one of football's greatest heroes carry such heavy shadows? And how did those hidden truths carve his legacy forever? Orenthal James Simpson was born in San Francisco in 1947, a child of a city marked by both glamour and grit. The young boy grew up in the housing projects of Potrero Hill, a neighborhood where opportunity seemed scarce and survival demanded toughness. His childhood illnesses left him frail, yet by his teenage years, he had transformed his body into a weapon of speed and strength. Football became the outlet, the stage where his name first began to echo. At the University of Southern California, Simpson's legend took shape. Wearing the cardinal and gold, he became more than an athlete. He was a spectacle. The 1968 season sealed his immortality, winning the Heisman Trophy with a blend of elegance and ferocity that left crowds gasping. His runs were poetry in motion, a cascade of broken tackles and sprinting bursts that seemed almost impossible to choreograph. He wasn't just playing football, he was rewriting how it could look. The Buffalo Bills made him their crown jewel. In a decade defined by defense and brute force, Simpson brought glamour. His 6'1" frame glided across frozen fields, cutting through defenders as if gravity itself favored him. In 1973, he broke the 2,000-yard rushing mark, the first man ever to do it in a single season. He was not just great, he was mythic, a living headline. But beneath the cheers, a deeper tension brewed. Simpson represented more than a running back. He embodied a cultural crossroads. In an America fractured by race, politics, and shifting ideals, he chose a different path. He distanced himself from the activist voices of his era. While others demanded justice, Simpson crafted an image of neutrality, of assimilation, of belonging in the polished world of television and endorsements. The contradiction between his background and his choices would follow him like a shadow. He was adored, yet he was doubted. He was celebrated, yet he was whispered about in locker rooms and boardrooms. To teammates, he could be aloof. To rivals, he was arrogant. To executives, he was both a golden ticket and a potential liability. Fame had given him power, but also magnified every flaw. This is where the core conflict of O.J. Simpson's story begins. The tension between grit and glamour, between the raw streets of his childhood and the shining lights of celebrity, between the violent demands of the NFL and the fragile desire to remain untouchable. He was the juice, he was electric, he was unstoppable. Yet he carried within him a vault of grudges and fractured bonds, and those would shape his career as much as any broken tackle or sprint into the end zone. #5. The Clash, with the Buffalo Bills ownership. O.J. Simpson's brilliance in Buffalo was unquestioned. He had become the league's brightest star, carrying a struggling franchise into national relevance. Yet behind the curtain, his relationship with the Bills' ownership was fractured, tense, and ultimately bitter. For all the touchdowns he scored, Simpson never forgave the way he felt controlled, undervalued, and at times betrayed by the very men who signed his paychecks. The Buffalo Bills were a small market team in the 1970s, desperate for identity. In O.J., they had their savior. He filled Rich Stadium with energy and placed Buffalo on the NFL map. But for Simpson, the glamour never matched the grind. He wanted more than just victories. He wanted Hollywood lights, primetime exposure, and the treatment of a global celebrity. Buffalo, with its snowstorms and blue-collar ethos, often felt like a cage rather than a stage. The friction began with money. Simpson believed his talent justified contracts on par with the biggest stars in sports, yet the Bills' management was cautious. Negotiations were often cold, impersonal, and laced with a reminder that running backs were replaceable. To Simpson, it wasn't just business. It was disrespect. Each contract meeting felt like a dismissal of his value, a refusal to acknowledge that he was transforming the game itself. The breaking point came after his record-shattering 1973 season. He had rushed for over 2,000 yards, a feat no one had imagined possible. The world crowned him king. Yet the Bills' front office treated the achievement as leverage rather than legacy. They saw a commodity at his peak, not a man who had redefined their franchise. Simpson felt exploited. He gave them history, and in return, he received suspicion and restraint. The symbolic moment of betrayal came in 1978, when the Bills traded him to the San Francisco 49ers. To many, it was a business decision. His knees were weakening, his speed diminishing, and the team needed to rebuild. But to Simpson, it was an insult of the highest order. Buffalo had taken his prime, squeezed every ounce of brilliance from his body, and discarded him when he was no longer invincible. He was not a partner in their story, only a piece of their machinery. For years afterward, Simpson rarely spoke warmly of Buffalo's ownership. He acknowledged the fans. He acknowledged the city's passion, but he never forgave the men in suits who turned him from savior to surplus. Even in later interviews, there was a sharpness in his tone when the subject of management arose. The cold truth lingered. For O.J., Buffalo was both the stage of his greatest triumph and the site of his deepest resentment. The irony is that Buffalo immortalized him. The snow, the crowds, the roaring runs through frozen fields. These are the images that cemented his legend. Yet for Simpson himself, those memories were inseparable from bitterness. Behind every highlight was a ledger of perceived slights. Behind every cheer was the echo of betrayal. Cold truth. He never forgave the Buffalo Bills' ownership. The grudge lived on long after the touchdowns faded. #4. The resentment toward the NFL establishment. O.J. Simpson loved the spotlight, but he often despised the system that controlled it. Beyond the battles with Buffalo's ownership, his animosity stretched to the NFL establishment itself. The league executives, the commissioners, and the old guard mentality that dictated who deserved power and recognition. For all his talent, Simpson never felt fully embraced by the league he elevated. From the outside, O.J. appeared to be the league's golden child. He was paraded in commercials, cast as the face of the NFL's glamour, and showcased in highlight reels that sold the sport to millions. Yet beneath the glamour, Simpson felt the league was quick to use him, but slow to protect him. The wear and tear on his body was immense. The Bills' offense relied almost entirely on his legs, feeding him the ball over 300 times a season. In an era of brutal defenses, he endured hit after hit, often without complaint. But when injuries mounted, he believed the league looked the other way. The resentment deepened during contract disputes and negotiations surrounding television deals. Simpson saw how the NFL grew rich off his image. His iconic Hertz commercials, his star turns on Monday Night Football, and the endless reruns of his runs through Defenders. All of it fueled the league's expansion into mainstream entertainment. Yet in his view, his compensation never reflected his role as both athlete and brand ambassador. He was the bridge between football's gritty past and its glossy future, but he felt shortchanged by those who controlled the empire. One of the clearest flashpoints came when Simpson pursued Hollywood acting roles during his playing career. League executives frowned on his dual ambitions, insisting football came first. To O.J., this was hypocrisy. They had no issue selling his likeness when it suited them. But when he sought autonomy in shaping his career, suddenly the NFL wanted him in line. The contradiction cut deep. He wanted to be more than a player. He wanted to be a celebrity on his own terms. The league, however, wanted control. Simpson's bitterness toward the establishment also stemmed from how the NFL handled issues of race. He positioned himself differently than outspoken athletes of his time. refusing to be a political figure. He once famously said, "I'm not black, I'm O.J." That phrase revealed his desire to transcend labels, but it also exposed the fragile bargain he struck with the league. In his mind, he gave them marketability without controversy. Yet he never felt the league truly welcomed him into its inner circle of power brokers. He was essential, but expendable, celebrated, but never fully trusted. The most symbolic moment of this tension came late in his career, when he looked for a graceful exit. Simpson hoped for a farewell tour, the kind of league-wide recognition given to legends. Instead, his departure from the NFL was quiet, almost indifferent. No orchestrated send-off, no carefully staged goodbye. For Simpson, it was proof of what he had long suspected. To the establishment, he was never family, only a tool. Cold truth. Simpson never forgave the NFL's power brokers. He believed they profited from his greatness, yet denied him the respect and autonomy he craved. For him, the league's glittering empire was built on his legs, but they left him behind when the sprint was over. #3 The rift with teammates. In Buffalo, behind every highlight of O.J. Simpson sprinting downfield, there were 10 other men straining, blocking, and bleeding to make the run possible. Yet for all the glory he received, the locker room of the Buffalo Bills was often divided. Simpson's teammates admired his talent, but many resented his arrogance, his distance, and his celebrity aura. For O.J., the tension was mutual. He believed they never understood his burden, never truly shared his vision of stardom. At the heart of the rift was the imbalance of credit. Simpson's 2,000-yard season in 1973 became one of the most celebrated achievements in football history. He was splashed across every magazine cover, courted by advertisers, and crowned as the face of the NFL. But his offensive line, nicknamed the Electric Company, because they turned on the juice, felt overlooked. These were blue-collar men, bruised and battered, who opened the lanes for history. In their view, Simpson's fame drowned out their sacrifice. Simpson rarely went out of his way to share the spotlight. To him, greatness was individual, a reflection of his body, his speed, his will. He was polite in interviews, occasionally acknowledging his blockers, but within the team, the imbalance lingered like smoke. Resentment brewed in quiet conversations, in sidelong glances, in the unspoken divide between star and soldier. Money only widened the gap. Simpson's contracts, endorsements, and Hollywood connections created a lifestyle far removed from his teammates' realities. While others lived paycheck to paycheck, Simpson stepped off planes in tailored suits, his smile flashing in commercials, his weekends spent among celebrities. He was their teammate on Sunday, but on Monday, he belonged to a different world. That duality fractured trust. One emblematic moment came after a crushing loss in 1976. In the locker room, frustration boiled over. Some players accused Simpson of caring more about his brand than the team's record. To them, he was chasing yards and personal glory, while the Bills slid deeper into mediocrity. Simpson's response was cold. He reminded them that without him, the Bills would be invisible. Without his talent, they would be nobodies, in a forgotten city. The words cut deep, and the divide became permanent. Later in his career, when Simpson reflected on Buffalo, he often spoke warmly of the fans, occasionally of the city, but rarely of his teammates. The bond that usually defines championship squads never existed in Buffalo. Instead, there was distance, suspicion, and bruised pride. Even when some members of the Electric Company were honored in reunions, Simpson's presence was strained. Smiles for the cameras, silence off stage. The bitterness was mutual. Many linemen felt Simpson never gave them the credit they deserved. Simpson, in turn, felt they never recognized the pressure he carried as the face of the league. It was a rivalry, not fought on the field but inside the same locker room, a quiet war of egos and resentment. Cold truth. O.J. Simpson never forgave his teammates for doubting him, and many never forgave him for overshadowing them. The fractures of Buffalo's locker room remained long after the cheers faded. #2. The war with the steel curtain. Every great hero needs a nemesis. And for O.J. Simpson, that nemesis wore black and gold. The Pittsburgh Steelers of the 1970s, led by the legendary Steel Curtain defense, became his most relentless obstacle. If Simpson's runs looked like poetry against ordinary teams, They looked like desperate struggles against Pittsburgh. It was a rivalry of speed against steel, glamour against grit, and neither side forgot the collisions. The Steelers' defense was built on punishment. Mean Joe Green, L.C. Greenwood, Jack Lambert, and Mel Blount turned football into trench warfare. Their mission was simple: crush the opponent's will. For Simpson, it was personal. Every time he lined up against Pittsburgh, his reputation was on trial. Could his elegance survive their brutality? Could his glamour survive their grit? The clashes defined an era. In 1975, the Bills faced the Steelers in the playoffs. It was Simpson's chance to prove himself on the biggest stage. The result was a nightmare. Pittsburgh swarmed him, stuffing runs before they began, hitting him with a ferocity that seemed designed not just to stop him but to humiliate him. He finished the game with a mere 49 rushing yards. For a man who had built his legend on dominance, the steel curtain exposed his vulnerability. The rivalry was not just physical, it was symbolic. Simpson represented the NFL's evolution toward stardom, marketing, and celebrity. The Steelers embodied the old-school ethos: toughness, unity, sacrifice. In every matchup, those worlds collided. For fans, it was spectacle. For Simpson, it was torment. One unforgettable image came when Jack Lambert, the snarling middle linebacker, met Simpson head-on at the line of scrimmage. The hit echoed through the stadium. Simpson flattened, Lambert standing over him like a predator. The crowd roared, and for once, it was not in awe of O.J., but in delight at his defeat. That image haunted him. He could outrun defenders across the league, but against Pittsburgh, he was mortal. The bitterness deepened as the Steelers ascended to dynasty status, winning 4 Super Bowls in the decade. Simpson, for all his brilliance, never reached the Super Bowl stage. And in his mind, Pittsburgh had stolen that chance. They were the wall that stopped his destiny. The reminder that talent alone could not overcome collective will. In interviews years later, Simpson admitted the frustration, but masked it with humor. He would say the Steelers were simply too good, but his tone carried a sharp edge. For a man who defined himself through invincibility, those defeats were wounds that never healed. He had conquered records, conquered fame, even conquered Hollywood, but he never conquered the steel curtain. Cold truth: O.J. Simpson never forgave the Steelers. They were the defense that shattered his illusion of untouchability. The dynasty that reminded him his legend was incomplete. To him, they were not just opponents, but the barrier between greatness and immortality. Pajon, the fractured image, race, identity, and the price of neutrality. For all the grudges O.J. Simpson carried, against owners, against teammates, against the steel curtain, none shaped his legacy more than his complicated relationship with race and identity. In a time when athletes like Jim Brown, Muhammad Ali, and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar used their platforms to fight for civil rights, Simpson chose a different path. He pursued neutrality, assimilation, and commercial appeal. It won him fame, but it cost him trust. And deep inside, it left scars he never admitted. The 1960s and 70s were turbulent years in America. Civil rights marches, urban unrest, and shifting cultural values placed black athletes at the center of political struggle. Jim Brown had retired from football to become an outspoken activist. Ali refused the draft and risked prison for his beliefs. Kareem openly challenged injustice. These men were warriors off the field as much as on it. Simpson, however, chose another route. "I'm not black, I'm O.J.," he once declared. It was more than a quip, it was a philosophy. He saw himself not as a representative of his race, but as an individual who could transcend labels. He sought to be the man everyone admired. Black, white, rich, poor. To advertisers, this was gold. He was safe, marketable, the perfect face for middle America. But to many in the black community, it was betrayal. He had the power to speak, but chose silence. The defining moment of this fracture came during the late 60s, when prominent athletes gathered at the Cleveland Summit to support Muhammad Ali's stand against the Vietnam draft. Simpson was invited but declined. He preferred to remain distant, pursuing his career without political entanglement. For activists, it was cowardice. For Simpson, it was survival. But the decision branded him forever. On the field, his choice shaped how rivals and teammates viewed him. Some respected his discipline, others whispered that he was too eager to please, too eager to belong to a world that would never fully accept him. In locker rooms, the question of identity was unspoken but ever present. Was O.J. one of them, or had he already left them behind for Madison Avenue? Even in Hollywood, the contradictions followed him. He was celebrated, yet rarely given roles that challenged stereotypes. He was polished, yet still confined by invisible lines. He lived in a space between worlds. Adored, but never fully trusted. Admired, but never fully claimed. This hidden truth, the fracture between who he was, who he wanted to be, and how the world saw him, defined his career more than any rushing record. It explained why he clung so fiercely to image, why he distanced himself from causes, and why resentment simmered beneath the smile. He had fame, but he lacked belonging. He had glory, but he carried an emptiness that no endorsement could fill. Cold truth. O.J. Simpson never reconciled his identity. He was a hero to some, a sellout to others, and in his own mind, he remained caught between worlds. That fracture lived with him long after his last carry, shaping not just his legacy, but his fate. Every great story has its shadows. And for O.J. Simpson, one of the most enduring was not an enemy, but a friend. Al Cowlings, his teammate from USC, and later in the NFL, became both ally and ghost, a constant reminder that even loyalty carried hidden truths. Cowlings was there from the beginning. At USC, he blocked for O.J., sharing in the glory of college triumphs. In Buffalo, he played alongside him. Though his career never reached the same heights, their bond was deep, forged not just in football but in years of shared ambition. Yet within that closeness lay a quiet tension. Cowlings lived in O.J.'s shadow, forever the sidekick to the superstar. As Simpson rose into national fame, Cowlings followed. He became friend, bodyguard, confidant, even chauffeur. But whispers surrounded the relationship. Did Simpson truly value him, or did he exploit the loyalty of a man who would never say no? To many, Cowlings symbolized the entourage culture that fed Simpson's ego, insulating him from criticism, shielding him from accountability. The most iconic moment came years after football, in 1994, when Cowlings drove the white Ford Bronco carrying Simpson during the infamous low-speed chase. The image was unforgettable. Police cruisers trailing, helicopters circling, millions watching live. Yet behind the spectacle was a hidden truth that stretched back decades. Al Cowlings had always been there, loyal to a fault, trapped in a role he never escaped. Cold truth. Cowlings was not an enemy, but his presence revealed another fracture in Simpson's life. Even his closest friendship carried imbalance, dependence, and unspoken pain. For O.J., the loyalty of Al Cowlings was both gift and burden, a mirror of a life where fame consumed every bond. By the time O.J. Simpson's playing days ended, he was more than a football player. He was an icon of contradictions, a man whose brilliance electrified stadiums, yet whose hidden truths followed him like shadows across decades. His legacy was never just about records. It was about the fault lines beneath the records, the fractures that revealed the cost of greatness. On the field, Simpson had rewritten history. He was the first man to surpass 2,000 rushing yards in a season, a record that transformed him from star to myth. His runs through frozen Buffalo afternoons remain some of the most cinematic images in NFL history. He glided, he darted, he seemed untouchable. Yet even as fans stood in awe, resentment brewed behind closed doors. Ownership viewed him as expendable. Teammates questioned his loyalty. Rivals exposed his limits. The league profited from his fame, but denied him the farewell he craved. His triumphs were vast, but so too were his grudges. The 5 truths reveal a man pulled in every direction. By Buffalo's ownership, who traded him when his body broke. By the NFL establishment, who controlled his image but never gave him autonomy. By teammates, who resented his celebrity. By the steel curtain, who humbled him on the field. By the complex burden of identity, where he chose neutrality over activism, only to find himself isolated between worlds. These were not isolated moments. They were threads woven into the fabric of his career. The bonus truth of Al Cowlings added another layer. Even his most loyal friendship revealed imbalance, dependence, and quiet pain. In Simpson's orbit, loyalty was tested, strained, and often consumed by the weight of his fame. What emerges from these truths is a portrait of contradiction. Simpson was adored by millions, yet mistrusted by those closest to him. He was celebrated as a hero, yet whispered about as self-serving. He was the symbol of speed and glamour, yet shackled by grudges he never released. The contradictions did not end with football. They followed him into Hollywood, into endorsement deals, and ultimately into infamy. For the NFL, Simpson's career represented both triumph and warning. He showed how a single player could transcend the sport, turning football into a stage of entertainment and celebrity. But he also revealed the dangers of that transformation. When the game becomes brand, when the player becomes product, loyalty fractures. Teams see commodities, not men. Teammates see egos, not brothers. Fans see glamour, not scars. Simpson's legacy within the game remains undeniable. He is remembered as one of the greatest running backs in history. His name carved into record books and highlight reels. Yet his story is inseparable from the truths that haunted him. His inability to forgive, his fractured relationships, his struggle with identity, and his pursuit of fame, at any cost. These defined him as much as any rushing yard. And then there is the final irony. Simpson longed to be remembered for his greatness on the field, not for the storms that followed after. Yet his hidden truths ensured the opposite. His career cannot be told without them. They are not footnotes. They are the story. Cold truth. Beyond trophies and glory, it was the grudges, the betrayals, and the fractures that defined O.J. Simpson. His legacy is not only that of a record-breaking runner, but of a man consumed by shadows. The cheers have faded, the highlights replay in silence, but the truths remain. He passed from the game in 1979, his body weakened, his legend complicated. Today, his name carries both awe and controversy, triumph and tragedy. O.J. Simpson's story is not a simple tale of yards and touchdowns. It is the story of what lies beneath greatness, the cost of chasing perfection, and the truths that could never be outrun. O.J. Simpson's career remains one of the most captivating chapters in NFL history. His brilliance electrified millions. His flaws divided those closest to him, and his hidden truths revealed the price of living as both legend and commodity. Beyond the trophies, beyond the highlight reels, it was the betrayals, the grudges, and the fractured identity that shaped the man history remembers. Now the question is yours. Which of these truths shocked you the most? Was it the bitterness with Buffalo's ownership, who traded away their star after draining his prime? Was it the resentment toward the NFL's power brokers, who controlled his image but never gave him respect? Was it the rift with teammates who felt overshadowed? Or the war with the steel curtain that humbled his greatness? Or was it the fracture of identity, where he distanced himself from activism and paid the price of belonging nowhere? Every viewer will see a different truth as the most defining. Some may admire his achievements and dismiss the grudges. Others may see those grudges as the real story, the cold truth behind the glamour. That debate is what keeps Simpson's legacy alive, decades after his final carry. If you enjoyed uncovering these hidden truths, subscribe to NFL Hidden Truths. Here, we tell the stories the highlight reels never reveal, the rivalries, the scandals, the untold battles that shaped football's golden age, from Joe Namath to Lawrence Taylor, from Walter Payton to O.J. Simpson. We bring you the truths that define the legends. Join the conversation. Comment below with the rivalry or hidden truth that struck you most. And subscribe so you never miss the next untold story of football's greatest era.